Okay, so we're gonna work on this painting today. We are working with a black and white image, and we're gonna call this our first painting in black and white. And we're gonna do techniques called tiling in this image. I have traced out my box, and now I'm going to paint a midtone, a 3, over the entire box. And we did this before in the other layering painting. So I decided that I want to call this a midtone. It's not in the dark, it's not in the light, it's somewhere between those two things. So when I'm mixing a midnote in this way, I'm going to lay down paint on top of my reference. And the key for doing this is to actually let it dry, so that you can compare those two values. So I'm going to get my hair dryer out. Hopefully this is plugged in. And I dried it completely, and I just want to take a look at it and see if I can get my camera to focus. Oops. I think it looks okay. It's a little light, I would say, but I'm gonna trust the process. So I realized when I first painted the first square, the midtone was much darker than I expected. So now I'm painting out more squares, adding white to them, so I can reevaluate it after it dries. Value charts, and we made two. I made one, the first one, and then I made a second one. And my second one steps more evenly, from white or 1 to 5. So what I want to do now is just choose the best 3 from the group that I've made. And I would say, and we got lots of different values in here. I would say this one is closer to a 4 rather than a 3, though it's somewhere between those two. So then I added more white in this one, and I still feel like this one is too dark. So even closer, you know, between these two. This one I actually think works pretty good as a 3. So I'm going to use this one in the painting that I'm going to work on today. And basically, I'm going to give you a little preview. So I did this um, painting earlier. I didn't have my camera on, unfortunately, but I actually have made this painting before. So this is what we're trying to get to, and this is our reference. But the idea of figuring out your value scale first and then painting is a really good idea. So I'm going to use this box because it's the closest. And one of the things that I find with these paintings is to make them upside down. So instead of making them like this, trying to paint this to this, I always invert it, just like the way we did with our upside down Picassos. And the reason I do this is because it's much easier to appreciate the values when they're upside down rather than worried about the figures or the other parts that may give you trouble. So we're going to do that with this one. And we're going to do another technique. So we're going to upside down it. And we're also going to tile it. And tiling is something that I use to focus my eye on something particular. So what I do is I take the image and I fold it into quadrants. Then I'm going to lay down that grid onto our number 3 background. And then I'm going to fold it just like this.
So I'm ready to paint my first quadrant, but before that, I'm going to remix my 5-step scale. So now I'm painting in my 4 values. And what I do is I try to cover all my 4s and 5s at this point and leave my midtone. Now I'm painting my 2 values.
Covering it up, the places that will be bright white. So I'm putting the shape around the head because I know eventually there's like parts that are like a 2 here, but they're going to be parts that are 1s. But I'm just setting up for that. Also, I feel like there's 2s here. There's a little bit of a 2 here. And definitely there's 2s here. Okay, now I'm going to 5. And 5, if you remember, is complete coal black with no white in it. And if you want to go to your pigment box and pull out that, it's a good idea. So now I'm going to look for parts that are the darkest. And in this case, we have a line here, maybe another line here. Definitely this one is darker. No, there's like this little part right here is a little darker. There's a little difference here. So I'm going to put that in. There's another dark area here and here. And then this edge moves to dark. This edge in the middle is a little darker. And I'm going to just do some dots here. And let's come over here. This edge is darker. Little shape in this box that's a little bit darker. Looks like here, here. And here I'm just doing little dots. All right, so then the last section is putting your whites on. Now this is key. You got to get all the paint out of your brush. You know, make sure that when you test the pigment, you're not having any of other pigments in it, just the way we did with the black. So I'm mixing up my white. And now I'm going to put in my bright whites, bright ones. And one of the things is to to notice is where do the ones and the fives actually touch each other. So here they happen around this body. And then, so I'm putting those first, and then I'm going to go back to my twos because I do think I want to get certain other shapes. Like there's like a little comma shape. Just making little clarifications. There's like a little light part here. Just correcting things as I go. I'm actually painting with the mid-tone right now. Put a few little dots here. And when you're tiling, every shape matters. We know this is an important shape because it's got the darks and the lights right next to each other. That means it's going to be the highest contrast. But we also look for other things that are lower contrast because they're supporting cast.
Okay, now I'm painting my fours. So after the fours are in, now we go to the twos.
Again, we know this is going to be pretty light, but instead of using white at this point, we're going to use that too. And this area, except for maybe one area and a little darkness over here, it's all mid-tone. So I'm just going to leave it alone. And now I'm going to put in the dark areas. And there is this dark kind of triangle here that meets with this triangle. So I keep popping around the image.
Now we're going to put in our ones.
only a few places there'll be ones. And remember, we have to put this little area back between. This has a little lighter in the middle. Now I'm painting really small. I'm gonna fix, I wanna put one dot here. Let's see what's going on this side. I can do this, watch this. And I feel that I'm moving in the right direction. There are definitely, it's much more hazier in this image, and mine is a little brighter, but I'm not concerned about it at this point. All right, so let's move on to 3. And I'm going to try to get a little closer for this 3 so you can see it a little, what I'm seeing. And I'm going to put 4 down everywhere except for where I see 1 and 2s. I'm not going to leave this light. I'm going to actually paint it in later. I'm actually going to cover that over. So a very abstract square.
Now I'm going in with 5s.
And I'm going to place this line here. And those are the 2 vertical elements, meaning they're really 90 degrees. Maybe this one's a little less so. Those are, to me, the easiest ones to start with. And then I'm going to do, like, squint my eyes and just see this angle and paint it.
And we're ready for our 2s next.
And now we're going to paint in the light areas. So right here, you got an area that's definitely a 3, and then this is the 2. So we're going to just paint. And I can paint even across like that. And next thing I'm going to do is put this line in. So a little mark here. And there's also a little bit of light, and you'll see this around the edges of things, especially when it comes really close to the darkest darks. You'll see a little bright spot in those areas, and you want to keep an eye out for them. I'm going to just put in some mid-tone here because I feel like that went a little dark. Mid-tone.
Now I'm going into the ones.
And again, I'm being really careful with areas where black and white intersect or they share an edge because I know they're going to be the most important things. Okay, so I'm mixing up our 4. Which makes me paint much larger shapes at the beginning. And then I can layer the darker areas on top.
Now I'm mixing up a 2. I'm going to put those in. So now I'm going into my darks and I'm trying to put that line down.
What's happening here? And then behind this, we go to 5. And these little shapes, again, I go around the whole image and I see any opportunity to lay in a small bit of 5, I will. Not too much. They're not big shapes. Our lightest lights. Again, this is important. That's what that says to me. This is also important. And this, this, the center is more important than I thought it was. So we'll see what happens when we pull the whole image together. Those are my two images side by side. And I remember I want to go back into this, but I want to wait till it dries. And you really get a sense of the values. One thing that I noticed between these two is there's a lot more white in this area, which makes sense because you have a person standing in front of a window and it's basically creating a halo around him. So I'm going to fix that. You get rid of that pixely look.
Now I'm putting in the final number fives on the TV set.
You can try it in one stroke, but then you can fix it with little strokes.
So at this point, I'm basically yoking together the whole image. So this concludes the tiling process. Let it dry, and we'll look at it in class